Preemptive strike. Hit first and with vigor to avoid being rapidly overwhelmed by your attacker. It's tad unfair, you would say. And to be fair, the idea of attacking someone first may even seem criminal. But those who are in the profession where they have to deal with violent crimes, for instance, policemen, bouncers, soldiers, and security personnel, will attest to the fact that preemptive strike is the best way to improve your chances of surviving a criminal assault. You don't wait to get stabbed or shot first, simply because you'll die. In other words, your enemy will not wait for you to get yourself ready. As soon as he feels he has the advantage, he will attack you with all his might. There are some countries which have mastered the art of preemptive strikes, and Israel stands at the top of the list of preemptive strikers. Hi and welcome. This is TFI Global, the foreign affairs and geopolitical analysis arm of the TFI Media Group, and I'm your host Atul Mishra. In this video, I will tell you about Israel's preemptive strike mode and why it will soon be activated against its arch nemesis, Iran. Let's begin. The Israel Defense Forces, or the IDF, have put forward a request to the Israeli government asking for a major defense budget hike, whose sole intention would be to neutralize Iran's capability to produce nuclear weapons. Israel has realized that when it comes to Iran and its mad drive to get hold of nuclear weapons, the West will not do much to stop the same. As such, Israel has taken upon itself the task of derailing the Shiite nation's military nuclear program. Now, as Iran and the West remain huddled up in Vienna over talks to revive the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action of 2015, popularly known as the Iran nuclear deal, the IDF is in no mood to sit idle and spectate mutely. Iran is an existential threat to the Jewish nation of Israel. Now, according to a Times of Israel report, the Israel Defense Forces is reportedly asking for a major budget increase worth billions of shekels so that it can properly prepare for a potential attack against Iran's nuclear program. The Khan public broadcaster reported on Wednesday that the request was made during preliminary discussions on the budget that the new Israeli government, led by Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, will seek to pass in the coming months. The report added that in the recent discussions between Israeli and American leaders, Israel's freedom of action in the face of the Iranian nuclear threat has been stressed. The IDF was thus said to be seeking sufficient additional funding in order to boost and preserve its Iran strike capabilities. On Wednesday, meanwhile, Defense Minister Benny Gantz called for Israel to step up its preparations for the possibility of Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon. Gantz said, "Against the greatest threat, Iran arming itself with a nuclear weapon, we have no choice but to expand our force buildup, to continue to rely on our human capital, and to adapt our capabilities and our plans." The Israeli Defense Minister called for the government to allow the country's security services to maintain military superiority, which ensures our secure existence and advances peace. Israel specializes in covert, clandestine, and special operations. Not just in the Middle East, such operations are considered around the world as the best. Mossad, the Jewish nation's intelligence agency, is credited to be a lethal force from which the country's enemies cannot escape. Iran knows firsthand how Israel can really derail its nuclear program if it so wishes. The cue for Israel to strike Iran would really be a red line, which Tehran has no clue exists. Thus, when the massive offensive against Iran does come, the Islamists in Tehran would not know what hit them. Meanwhile, Israel's armed forces have already put their extraordinary capabilities on display during the 11-day Israel-Hamas war. The kind of armory which Israel possesses, the sophisticated technologies it harbors, and the commitment of the IDF and all other security agencies of the country to protect their homeland is what makes the Jewish nation a force which should not be messed with. The defense budget hike requested by the IDF will most certainly be cleared by the government. What will then emerge would be an even more lethal Israel, which would have all capabilities to neutralize its enemies and their devious designs. So Iran ought to be very worried. We at TFI had explained in May itself why Iran should not rejoice the exit of Benjamin Netanyahu from the Israeli Prime Minister's office. We told you that the Shiite nation is in for a big surprise, as Israel's onslaught on Iranian nuclear ambitions and operations will continue till the moment Tehran does not abandon its nuclear program completely. Mossad is a formidable and largely autonomous agency driven by an unmatched zeal to protect Jews and their historic homeland. It is an empowered agency which has not shied away from defying the tallest political leaders of Israel in the past. The IDF is no different. In the past few months, Israel has struck Iran and its strategic assets multiple times. Not very long ago, Israel attacked an Iranian shipping vessel with its mines, and it was then discovered that the ship was weaponized and mostly used by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. Then came the attack on the Natanz nuclear facility, where the new and advanced centrifuges installed by Iran started operating just hours before a blackout and electrical fault struck the site, taking Iran's nuclear program back by at least 9 months. Last year, in a huge setback to Tehran's nuclear program, Mossad reportedly assassinated Iran's chief nuclear scientist, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. Earlier in May, meanwhile, a massive fire broke out in Iran's southwestern city of Bushehr, near the Islamic Republic's only functioning nuclear power plant. According to Iran, Israel was also behind the June 23rd attack on a building in Karaj belonging to Iran's Atomic Energy Organization. The hit site was most certainly one of Iran's centrifuge manufacturing plants, which is a huge blow for the Islamic Republic's nuclear weapons uranium enrichment program. With a massive hike in the country's military budget, Israel will relentlessly attack Iran's nuclear sites and might even launch an all-out attack against the Shiite nation while it still does not harbor nuclear weapons.